the 31st, last day of the month, and we are heading into August, my favorite month. And we are going to hopefully bring a program you'll have some interest in today. I'm going to be talking a little bit further about the fact of who can handle the national security. It's not even a question, shouldn't even be a question of who should handle the national security protocols of the country, but it's a question because we're no longer a constitutional republic. Nobody's following the Constitution of this country. If they were, we would not be having all these problems out here with people trying to figure out what should be going on in Washington, and nothing is going on in Washington. I have to be honest and tell you that nothing is going on in Washington that ought to be going on. Most of what they're doing up there is illegal and unconstitutional, and we've got to call them on it. And I'm calling. I think that I wrote the most provocative piece today on my Facebook post, and all my pieces in Facebook are quite frankly provocative. But this one I think was more provocative than the ones I've written in the past, and I'm going to see how Facebook responds to it. I will say this about Facebook: Facebook has backed off a lot, and I've noticed this in my own posts, and they backed off a lot in terms of coming on and telling somebody to go to CDC and the WHO for more information. They're not saying that anymore because they've been discredited out here trying to tell those of us who were aware of the science that we were the ones that were off. I had read books by those who understand science, not these politicians like Anthony Fauci, who is put into the bureaucracy because he will in fact lie about the science. In fact, there's no how there. I don't know how you can be in the bureaucracy for 40 years and then continue to call yourself a doctor. We have to stop using terms doctor this and doctor that, and people not practicing medicine, and that includes those who once practiced medicine and not doing it any longer today. Once you are no longer doing it, you're not a doctor anymore. And those of us that have these degrees, we're not doctors. We have PhD degrees, but we're not doctors.
No, so interject there because we got newcomers and goers all the time, and you actually could be called doctor if you.
Not doctor, because doctor's a medical term.
But you still have the credentials academically. Some people would label you as that, right?
John, they used to do that in book club, and I used to always stop them because that's an inappropriate. It's like saying President Trump. He was president for 4 years. They say, and I'm not validating what they say, but they say he lost the election in 2020. Be that as it may, he's not in the White House anymore, and therefore he is not president. To call him President Trump is inappropriate. Language must mean something, and if we're going to use, I have a PhD degree, but if you in fact start talking about I'm a doctor, that's a medical term. They use this word doctor this and doctor that as a title of distinction. It is not to be used with people that have doctorate degrees. They're not doctors, they are people that have a doctorate degree. A doctor is a medical official, and he must be, at the time that he is called a doctor, he must be practicing medicine at that point in time. Anthony Fauci was not a doctor, he was a bureaucrat. And if we had seen him as a bureaucrat, he would not have gotten away with what he got away with in telling the whole nation and that feeding out into the world that a virus can escape out of a lab and affect the air all over the globe. You can't say that as a bureaucrat because we recognize it for what it is, a false narrative. But because they call him doctor, he can get away with that because they think they listen to a medical technician. A person giving them a medical diagnosis. That's not a medical diagnosis. It's a political diagnosis. And he made the diagnosis, let me say this without you get mad at me, he made that diagnosis as a bureaucrat, not as a medical doctor. No medical doctor can say that. Would say that if they were practicing, if they were true to the professions, first of all, do no harm. The first thing in the Hippocratic Oath is that first of all, do no further harm. When you arrive on the scene, don't do what they did when they arrived on the scene when Garfield, for example, elected in 1880. What happened once he had been wounded? The second president to be assassinated, they got there and he would have survived, but the doctor showed up. I just read the other day. This is not my subject today. I want to talk about the papers, who can handle the national security documents. I want to deal with that question. But before we get to that, there are two other topics I want to get to, and one of them, by the way, is in sports. You won't believe we're talking about sports on a political program. But I have to say something about the event this past weekend. But what I'm saying here is that I just read the other day that LeBron James' son, who is a star in the making in basketball, if he survives what I think were these coronavirus shots that he took, because there's a report, and I have not checked it out, but I read a report where LeBron James' son has had a heart attack. He's got to be no older than in his 20s. What are all these 20-year-olds doing having heart attacks? And where did we hear about this epidemic, one after the other, out there in practice and falling out and having heart attacks in practice? They're saying Hank Aaron took the shot. He's going to be there as a standard bearer to kind of tell the community they should go and get inoculated. This man's trying to do public good, but he's following bad science and out there doing further damage and didn't know it. You know, that's that road again. It's unforgivable. When you get out there and start doing things like that, know what you're talking about. And I read all these books that showed me very early that the science that which we're calling science was wrong. First of all, it doesn't make any common sense, as if sense is common. But this idea that you can have a virus escaping out of a single lab in a single location and then spreading all over the earth, but by the time that air gets out of that lab around the Wuhan virus, they say it's the Wuhan province, by the time that virus gets out there in that air in Wuhan, the air has dissipated the propensity of that virus to do the damage they're saying it's doing, and yet it did this damage all over the world. And yet the people's bodies are fine, but the virus came into a vessel, a human vessel, that otherwise would have been working perfectly, or working as near as it could be in terms of being in a healthy state. But the virus came in and interfered with that and messed up all the human machinery and turned it around into something that was not there before the virus arrived.
By the way, did you see the skit that was not skit, but it was a podcast that what was the name? His name was Dana Carvey and what was the other one? Hold on, Dana Carvey and Dave Spade. They talked about how they would miss COVID. And then they were doing a characterization or impression of how Fauci talks. I think it was Dana Carvey was doing that, like he kept on just ad hocing the advice and all this. It was, these guys are on the left. I don't think Dana Carvey is actually a right winger, and neither is David Spade. But they're mocking. But I wonder how come they didn't get censored for their mockery of the man who represents science.
Well, John, they backed off now. I'm saying more forceful things against it today. When I say day, I don't mean like today as the day I'm doing it. I've been doing it for a while, but in the aftermath of the uncovering of the facts in this whole COVID nonsense. And now that those of us that were coming with this notion that is inappropriate to make the claims that we're making in the medical field, that cannot be true because you cannot have a virus being that devastating in terms of the virus being in a single location and then the 5.5 quadrillion tons of air is affected by it. It's nauseating that people could go along with that and then deliver themselves to the pulse squirters. That's what they're called by Hume, who wrote the book about the. She was talking about the debate going on between Antoine Beauchamp and Louis Pasteur, and call it the lost biology, like the lost science.
But yeah, right now I just decided to try to go to live to YouTube because we haven't mentioned the COVID virus in weeks.
Uh-huh.
Now it comes up, so I probably get a little flag note from you're not supposed to talk about that and give me this misinformation warning. But it's like it's being challenged and it's being so if they
Oh, they're challenging it.
no, I said they will probably.
Oh, okay.
This is the first time.
No, they backed off a lot, John. They at one time, if you wrote anything, you know how they would put it at the bottom of your writing, we as if we were misinformed, and they wanted us to get the information correct. They would tell us to go to the CDC and the WHO. They're not doing that anymore. I wrote some things last week to see just as a test, and I said in the piece that I did that I better get off this subject before the Facebook censors tell me that I should in fact go get more resources from these agencies. But they're not doing that anymore because those agencies have been discredited. I knew I was right because I had read the literature.
Yeah, but the thing is, like I said, I think it's funny that Dana Carvey, he used to be from Saturday Night Live, I don't know, and he's been in a lot of movies, but he hasn't done anything in years that I can recall.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, him and Dave Spade, who was kind of he's from Michigan originally. He's a real rich kid, actually, but he's like, you could tell that because he comes across in his act and the way he talks. But he was raised in one of the more affluent suburbs of the Detroit area. And then also, I think he was related to that famous designer of handbags. She committed suicide a couple of years ago. Kate Spade, I guess that was his relative. But anyway, yeah, they're lefties. I mean, now they're making fun. They're mocking Fauci. I mean, I'm not like, see how they all maybe eventually the left could admit when somebody screws up. I mean, there's hope in that because now they're saying, yeah, look at this Fauci guy. He's not all that. He's not really all what he himself thought of himself. You're arguing against science itself. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, about these the PhDs, I noticed that no one in this it's an ego thing, but no one calls Dershowitz doctor. And the reason why they don't do that is because he doesn't have a PhD degree. And they should not call him they should not call him doctor if he did have a PhD degree. But if you notice, they don't call them doctor. They call him Allen sometimes. They call Jonathan Turley. They call him Jonathan. They don't even say Mister. But Mister is more appropriate to it. When I got my doctorate in '89. I'll be honest with you. I never even told. I put it on the record in the administration office, but I did not go around claiming that inside the building because I didn't want. I just didn't want to. I want a person to recognize what I know. The degree is a symbol of your information, and you should walk around where your information shows that you've done some study. They know that I've been somewhere.
Because you read the original sources too. I mean, you have read
and have gone to the original source as well, and went before this. You have to prove your manuscript, and I went in there, and there were 5 scholars that were supposedly constitutional scholars, and after I had talked for about 5 minutes or so, they didn't have any questions. Because to be honest with you, they had not thought through what they were asking me, and I don't think, and I'll say this again, I am yet to be corrected based on what I see, but I don't think anybody in this country understands. And if you don't understand this, you don't understand the Constitution. That is to say, you don't understand the impeachment process. That to me is a litmus test, and it took me a long time to understand something. I kept listening to what everybody was talking about, and I knew my training was something that was spoken to that. And what I was hearing was this noise that if you were trained in this area, you would not be saying those things. You could not be trained. You could not be even. You could not even call yourself a constitutional scholar, as they were calling themselves, and say the things they were saying. And I kept listening to them, and every time I would listen to them, I would do a sit back kind of thing, because I'm thinking I'm not hearing what I'm hearing, and I'm trying to get away from it to get more clarity in what's being said. And I could not believe some of the comments they were making, and that's all of them, quite frankly. And I called their names out because I'm not trying to hide anything here, and I called their names out because I just could not believe what they were saying. Lawrence Tribe, for example, said that impeachment has not taken place until the matter is referred to the House, until the matter taken up in the House. I don't even think he knows where that's found in the Constitution, but it says that until it's referred to the Senate for trial, the impeachment is not taking place. I'm gonna tell you something. If you say that to me, I'm gonna try not to use any profane language. That is so anti-constitutional that no person that understands the Constitution would say that. And I don't think, and I'm taking liberty here in saying this, but I'm taking some liberty in saying it because I don't hear this being challenged in the media by those, if they know, they would challenge it because it's not true, and they should not let it stand if they know better, and no scholars challenging it. What they said about what Lawrence Tribe has said should be challenged. He should not get away with saying things like that. And Alan Dershowitz, he's not as bad as Lawrence Tribe, but he should not get away with what he said. That you have to have treason, bribery, and other high crimes and misdemeanors to bring about impeachment. No scholar in the Constitution would say that. And if you scholars are saying that, you might have a degree in it, but you're not a scholar in the Constitution. Because you can't say that because that is absurd. It's not only untrue; it's absurd. I'm really tired of listening on TV where they're saying that might be an impeachable offense. I'm gonna tell you something that doesn't have any meaning. See, here's what nobody is saying in this country, and I'm saying it as a person that has a degree in it. And I'm challenging all those that have degrees in the area. I think that degree is in law, though, not in this area. But I'm saying it, and I dare anyone to say otherwise. But nobody's saying this. I'm saying it singularly in this country. There's no such thing as an impeachable offense. And people then will come up with the question, it necessarily raises the question, if there is no such thing as an impeachable offense, then how then do you have an impeachment process? That's a fair question.
I'm puzzled by that, but I'm puzzled by that.
Yeah, and so are the scholars. They don't have that's why they maintain their quiet. How do you have an impeachment process? How do you have an impeachment process if there is no standard for impeachment? Is that the point you're making, John, about why that?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, because we have they have the wording impeachment process or whatever within the Constitution.
Yes.
So I mean, but you're saying there's no impeachable offenses. There's no
because it has to go to the definition of impeachment.
Is that a basic? I always
let me define the word.
Okay.
All impeachment is. Listen very carefully here. Is there anything? Let me start at this point and work toward this point. Is there anything that says that you cannot be accused of something. There isn't, right? You can be accused, and then there's a trial based upon the accusation. And in fact, in our code, a person is to be presumed. Although we don't follow the code, we should. It's a very good code. We must be presumed innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt by a jury of one's peers. That does not mean your relatives, and it doesn't mean the people next door.
Or see, I'll interject something here. But see, the cops get to clear themselves of all their wrongdoing, so why can't we? You know?
Yeah, we need to follow. If we follow the Constitution, a lot of these problems that we're having in this country right now would be cleaned up overnight. If we would just go back to the framers. I'm trying to return this country back to the framers because those that are talking about it are doing a disservice to the country, because they're not talking about what the framers did. They're talking about something entirely different. They're talking about what the Supreme Court has done. The Supreme Court is not the law of the land. The Constitution is the law of the land. The Supreme Court is an offshoot of that was developed at the Constitutional Convention, where it was set up as the third branch of government, but under the Constitution of the United States. And it is also subject to the Constitution of the United States. It was born from it. And then to be making rulings away from the document that creates it, to me, is a travesty. No, we need to define the word. When Pearson say this is an impeachable offense, every time they say that, I have to cringe because I know I'm listening to a person that does not know what they're talking about. And all of them say it. But what is impeachment? Impeachment is an official accusation of wrongdoing. That is to say, you as Joe Blow citizen and I as George Moss Joe Blow citizen cannot bring a charge that can be carried into the Senate after charging the member of the president, the vice president, and the civil officer of the United States. I don't have the authority as a citizen of the United States to charge a president with a impeachment offense. It must be, and that's because you don't want to be wasting the time of the government with people doing frivolous things in terms of tying up the government's largesse and its time. And you don't want to do that by having everyone be able to bring a suit against the claims based upon that. You do that to your representatives, and you do it through a specific part of the representation in order to bring about the impeachment process. That's why it says in Article 1, Section 2, Clause 5, the House of Representatives, I'm going to quote it exactly, the House of Representatives shall choose its Speaker, shall do that, and have the sole power of impeachment. And it goes, therefore, through the House of Representatives. But listen to the terms here. Through the representatives, the people's representatives, and they can do that through the voice of the people. Let me tell you something here. Notice that Joe Biden has not been impeached. If there's any president that should be impeached, let us say be accused officially by the House. Because impeachment is just an accusation, but it's an official accusation. It's just not an accusation. I make an accusation against Biden every day. I think he's an illegitimate president. That's an accusation. Does it have weight? Well, he's still there, right? There are people come on TV every day. Taylor Green comes on almost every day talking about the president should be impeached. Well, what is she talking about? He should be charged with he should be brought before the House and impeached in the House. Now, is there any specific protocol in the House that says he must be impeached for this, this, and this? Let me tell you, scholar, something. There is nothing in the Constitution that says anything about what a person can be impeached for. And if you know better than I know, then show me. Where? Impeachment is in the House of Representatives, and therefore it is in Article 1, Section 2, protocol set up in that part of the Constitution. Show me in Article 1, Section 2, where it says anything specific about what the impeachment charge must be. Show it to me. Go and look for it. And when you find it, you tell me where it's located. When you start saying things, it sounds like it's an impeachable. It may be an impeachable offense. You're talking nonsense, and you're making unconstitutional statements. There's no specific basis to bring about impeachment. Impeachment only takes a majority vote in the House of Representatives. Now, let me tell you this. If you want to use the impeachment process for removal of an officeholder specified in the Constitution of who those officeholders are, and they are not members of the House and they're not members of the Senate, they're not subject to the impeachment process. There's a reason why that exists. We'll go into that sometime maybe in the future. I don't want to get too far because I got to deal with this topic that I came to the studio to deal with.
But you had to lay some groundwork though down. I think this is kind of important groundwork for what the title of the thing is about. The handling national security documents.
Yeah, I have to.
Yeah, you have to lay that down.
Yeah, I'm going to definitely get to that. That's why I'm not going to go into all of the other things we are off right now. I'm going to get to the national security papers that they're accusing Trump of having violated, and I'm going to get to that because I want to deal with that through which will reference the impeachment process. There's a reference being made here about that in the impeachment process. But don't forget it is a process, and it's a process that starts out by the official accusation in the House and then is referred to the Senate for trial. But what Adam Dershowitz and these others have gotten confused about is that there is a trial to be had, but they do not understand that when the trial is to be had in the Senate over the impeachment offense being one in which it brings about removal, then the standard is then up to something very specified. You see, the impeachment can be on anything that gets a majority vote. But if you're going to be doing something as serious as canceling out the election that was held by the entire population of the country, because the only person that votes for the only office holder through which the whole polity votes, the whole voting polity votes, is the President of the United States. And therefore, when you up the ante from the impeachment to trying to remove the office holder from office, and their office holders that can be removed are all specified as to who those office holders are, because you cannot remove a member of the House and the Senate through the impeachment process, because that process would be then to use the federal government to remove members of the states, office holders of the states. That's why it says, I'm right and all the rest of you that are saying otherwise are wrong. You don't have any more credentials than I have. And I earned my credentials. And none of you can come up against it. I'm telling you right now to your face, you're not qualified. None of you are qualified. Out here talking this madness. I'm telling you, you're wrong. People talking about you must have treason, bribery, and other high crimes and misdemeanors in order to bring about impeachment. That's not true. And that's why it's not found in Article 1 of the Constitution. You know where it's found? It's found in Article 2. Now, why is it found in Article 2? Do any of you scholars know why it's found in Article 2? It's found in Article 2 because Article 2 specifies who can be impeached under the Constitution of the United States. And it says in Article 2, the president and the vice president, and it singles them out because it then goes into another genre of those that can be impeached. I mean, not impeached, but can be brought to trial and removed from office because of the impeachment process. That's the way you should see it. You can impeach anybody, but they can break if they're a majority vote in the House. But if you're going to remove them, then what the framers did in their infinite, well, no wisdom is infinite, but in their tremendous understanding of what they were writing, that's what they did. They understood what they were writing. That's why it's so seamless. And we would go back to it, we would understand the grandeur of the writing that they put in place here, because when you look at it, as you have one layer laid over the other, it is so seamless that it does not contradict itself in any one of the particulars in the Constitution. That's a great document when you understand how it is put together. But the reason why it puts in the Article 2, why, first of all, why it's located there, is because it's the president and the vice president subject to the process. But you see, it names others there that are not like the president and vice president. They are unlike the others that are named in those that can be impeached. And they're unlike them because the president and the vice president are elected. Listen carefully. The members of the others that are subject to impeachment are the civil office holders of the United States, not elected office holders of the United States, except those that are named. That's why they single them out, because it says the president and the vice president, they are elected office holders. So they single them out, and then they say, and all civil officers of the United States. And the question now comes up, who are those persons who are the civil officers of the United States? Now, who are they? And that would explain why it is in Article 2. The civil officers of the United States are those who are appointed to their offices by the president. The president appoints all officers, all civil officers of the federal government are appointed by the president. Is that true or not? The civil officers are appointed by the President of the United States. The federal judges are appointed by the President of the United States. The ambassadors are appointed by the President of the United States, and the cabinet of the presidency is appointed by the President of the United States. You can see why at the Constitutional Convention, folks, why this is serious when they were sitting down there and putting in place Articles 1, 2, and 3, which is the separation of powers, and how they were trying to figure out if they needed to have checks and balances, not only between the three branches, but you need to have checks and balances within the executive branch. They were sitting there arguing that point. That's why they were arguing it. But what ended the argument there, because of the power invested in the President of the United States, The reason why the argument there was one that was put to bed very early in the discussion. If you go read the paper, Madison's notes. It was put to bed very early because of what I said was going on in that room. That they were talking about the just aggregating the power from a single source to multiple sources in order to create a separation of power in the executive branch of government, but changed their mind because they kept looking at that person in that chair. If scholars understood that, they would not put anyone above George Washington, because they put the power in all this power I'm talking about was put in George Washington's hands. They knew that's what they were doing at that convention, because there's not one person in that room of the 55 persons that will go in that room at some point in time between May the 25th, 1787 and September the 17th of that year. They knew, all 55 of those persons will eventually meet there. 42 of them there at the end of the gathering, 39 of them signing the Constitution of the United States. And every one of them that went in that room, everyone that participated in that convention, knew that person sitting in that chair as the president of that convention would be chosen to be the first president of the United States. And they had so much confidence in George Washington, they were willing to put all this power, I'm talking about right now, in this man's hands. Okay. See, John didn't think I was talking about.
Oh, I know. I knew what you were talking about. I knew that.
No, you didn't know what I was talking about.
Yeah, okay.
The handling of classified documents. Listen to me, John, very carefully. They put all that power without it being disarrogated with like it's disarrogated on. I mean, there are 9 members on the Supreme Court. There are 535 members in the Congress, and they're not in the same body. We don't have a unicameral Congress. We have a bicameral Congress. And those are checks and balances in those two branches of the Congress. But look what they did to my song. In the presidency of the United States, the singletary nature of that branch of government is singular to the executive office holder. And they did that because of who they knew sitting in that chair would occupy that office when they set up the presidency of the United States to run for the first time in 1788, and was the election over in 1789. 10 of the states voting for the president, and him getting all the electoral votes at that time, all 63 electoral votes, with 10 of the 13 states voting. North Carolina didn't vote in the election. I'm telling you, the electoral votes weren't counted from North Carolina, from New York, and from Rhode Island. 10 states elected George Washington, and the 63 electoral votes. Or was it 6 and 9? One of the two. I'll think of it in just a minute. It'll come back to me. 69, I'm going to say. Yeah, 69 electoral votes in the election of 1788, 1789, as it chose as the electoral college. The president was chosen and assumed office in 1789, but everybody knew who that person was going to be. The statue. You can go read the letter. That Alexander Hamilton wrote to George Washington. I read the letter, and I know exactly what he wrote. And everything he said was true. That he told Washington, in essence, you cannot go back to Mount Vernon. Your country is calling you. Your country is depending upon you.
How long is he? Okay, when Washington was fighting all the battles to win the war against England, that was like 7, 8, 10 years, wasn't it? To do the whole length of time?
The war lasted from 1776 to 1783.
So then, plus the years he spent in being president.
Well, he tried to go home after that. Washington kept trying to go home.
Yeah, and he kept on being called.
And I'm telling you something, folks. I know you're not down the depths of the digging, but look, I'm telling you what the digging shows. If you done it, George Washington was trying to disavow power. The world, I'll tell you this: the world was stunned. They never seen anything like this before. That's why I consider it blasphemy. It really is blasphemy, whether you know it or not. It's blasphemy to put anybody on Mount. It's not the intentions are bad. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to say they had bad intent, but it's blasphemy to put 4 presidents up there with George Washington. George Washington should be up there by himself to make a statement about his prominence and importance, his significance to the development of this country. Without George Washington, this country would never gotten off the ground. Too many conflicts. He was a single unifying force in the country. They trusted George Washington.
He was an aristocrat.
That's what he was, John, and that's why they had some respect for him. Then no person had ridden into a place where they had secured power, and then go there as a conquering force, get off the horse, and turn the horse around and head home. What is this? They didn't know what they were looking at. They did not know what they were looking at. They never seen that before.
Was that the Roman guy who become a tyrant twice just to set things in the right order, then hand it back to the people? It was
I know the story. I can't remember the name either.
Well, Cincinnati, Ohio is named after him.
Cincinnaticus.
Cincinnaticus. That was basically, he was our Cincinnaticus.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
John, Washington was great. You can't put anybody above Washington. I know you're trying to do it, but because you're trying to disavow, it's a way of circuitously disavowing the framers, getting around the founders of the country, putting a person as the 16th president that was, and call him the great emancipator to make it so that it looked like it's reasonable to put him up there above Washington.
The communists should love Washington because he represented how they always say, well, eventually there'd be a withering away of the state and the people would have power again. But you have to have the elite in control, and they're going to show the way for the proletariat to actually know how to operate. And after a while, there'd be a withering of the state. He did it. He handed the power back to the people.
Boy, that is such a consequential move that George Washington made. George Washington had to create the mold for the presidency. We hadn't had a president in the history of the world before. See, George Washington not just the first president of the United States. George Washington's the first president in the history of the world. He was the one that carved the mold out for it, and if he got it wrong, it would be gotten wrong for all time because he had to get it right at the very beginning and then set the precedent for it. Setting even the two-term president wasn't broken to 1940. There was no law in the book that said he had to stand down for 2 terms. George Washington did it anyway. This is the greatness of this man. But see, I want to tie this into why it is that everybody's off base right now talking about Donald Trump having classified information. You know, by them putting at the Constitutional Convention the authority in a single office holder, that office holder would be at the outset. The initial office holder of that office would be George Washington, and they did that because they knew that would be the office holder that would start off the process. And they trusted him to do the right thing. He didn't have to have checks and balances in the executive branch on his authority. Why? Because he had proven that he was a patriot. He had proven that. All they wanted was someone in there that would put the country, listen carefully, they would put the country first. You understand that? You put the country first. There's a song that says, without you, there's no me. Whatever that song is, the rest of it, that part caught me. Without the country, we don't have anything. And they knew that George Washington, by his actions, this man was a patriot. He had ridden off in the sunset in 1783. Once that war came to a close, George Washington turned his commission in. He was the commander-in-chief at that point. And when they put the president in Article 2 as the commander-in-chief, they were actually saying Washington. They were doing that, putting that power in George Washington's hand. Put the army in this man's hand. Can you believe that? Let me ask you this question here. Would you put are you comfortable with the military being in Biden's hand?
I wouldn't want him to go babysit my goldfish. I mean,
John, yeah, that would be problematical possibly too. But you definitely want your daughter in there with this man. This man has some problems, and that if it had been people like him at the beginning of this at this beginning point, that would not have been the case. You would believe there would disaggregate power in the executive branch of Biden, but it wasn't Biden, it was Washington. And that's where they did that. Now, let me bring something here to that in terms of the executive office holder and the classifying of information. You've heard of the separation of powers because you know that's in Article 1, Article 2, and Article 3 of the Constitution. You know that. That what the framers did at the convention was to recognize something that had not been recognized when they drew up the Articles of Confederation. There are different ways to skin a cat. There are different roads to Beijing.
ASPCA people do not contact us. He was just used as an analogy, okay?
Yeah, John, that is the point is here that they thought the way you, in fact, control power is simply not to allow power. It was just to them cut and dried. But at the Constitution Convention, they found out after that had been placed from 81 until 87 that was not. It was just not workable. And so they had to find another way to do it. And the way they did it was to do something that had not been done before. First of all, separate out the what would be the executive government from the judicial government. Though you go into other parts of go into Europe, and you see the parliament, the lawmaking, the body and the legislative body, she said legislative body and the judicial body, those are combined into one, and it does not work well. You need to have we found another way of doing it. You have to continue because when you don't have confidence in the prime minister, the whole government collapses because that's two different bodies in which there's a nolo contendere in that respect. So the government collapsed under that no vote of confidence. We have to find a different way. And what they did there was something that had never been done before. This is the genius that was in that room. How to come up with a plan to keep power under control at the same time, not to do it by shutting power down, which is what the articles had done. The powers require unanimity before anything can be done. All 13 states had to agree on all the things. No amendment can be passed without all 13 states in agreement, and they don't have common interests in all the particulars. That's very difficult to. That's why the government was stymied. And so they had to find a different way. They recognized that this was not sacrosanct, and they changed it, and they separated the powers. Now, in the separation of powers, we had a unicameral government, didn't we? They changed that and made it bicameral, and then had the two branches inside of the Congress checking on each other. They didn't put the impeachment process under they didn't put it under the branch of Congress that impeaches. They put the impeachment in the House, and they did two things after that. Put the trial in the Senate, and by putting it in the Senate, put it under the auspices of the states. That's the genius. The House, the people's body, and the Senate, the state's body, That's their representatives. They sent them to Washington to oversee their interests as states. They were there for that reason. But look at how they separated everything. But in the executive branch, they did not separate it. And that person sitting in that chair in that room was the reason why they did not separate it. And therefore, those of you that are now saying the handling of classified documents and things of that sort, you don't understand the founding of this country and why it was founded the way it was founded and why the power was put in the hands of the president, exclusive to any other office holder in the federal government. There were office holders there. None of them were secreted into this place in the executive branch of government. See, I can go, see, when I read the transcript on my way to my doctorate degree at quote unquote, in front of these scholars here, I had read that, they had not read it. I was telling them, because some of them thought that the impeachment of Andrew Johnson was appropriate. I actually had that really came up in part of that discussion. Boy, the impeachment of Johnson was, I'm talking about Andrew Johnson, was so dangerous.
Too bad we didn't have a impeachment of LBJ, but you know, he was a walking bag of.
Yeah,
pieces.
everything, John. We need to talk about the impeachment, the impeachments we've had, and one that we didn't have, through which the threat of impeachment was used to force the ouster of a president. We'll talk about that at some point in the future. We have to get to that conversation at some time, because it's very important we understand. We have to understand our history, our true history, not this nonsense that's passing for it. But that was so dangerous for them to do what they did in the impeachment of Johnson, because they were contending that they had the right to impeach Johnson for him making decisions within the executive branch of government as it relates to his own cabinet. If that had happened, that would have been the blurring, not only the blurring, but the erasure of the lines that were set up by the Articles 1, 2, and 3, because the separation of powers would have no longer existed, because the legislative branch of government would have joined on to the powers that are given to the President of the United States. The President chooses his own cabinet. If the cabinet can be chosen by the legislative branch of government, what would that mean? It means the legislative branch of government can run the executive branch of government, and therefore there is no separation of powers. I said that to say that it's dangerous for others to claim that they can subsume the authority of the President of the United States, whose powers were put singly in the President's hands, for him to make the decisions, all of the decisions in the executive branch of government.
In other words, my way I view this, the Democrats are trying to come up with laws that didn't exist before. That's called ex post facto laws.
That's right, John.
They're not even trying to do it legislatively either. They're just trying to say, we're going to throw this out.
That's right.
Most people are going to go along because it's us doing it. But when we're not supposed, if you want to make something a crime, you're going to have to let some people slide who actually did in fact, do something you thought was wrong, make the law, and they're not going to be held prosecutable by that standard, because you created a law after the fact. And that's what they're doing.
That's what they're doing.
Yeah.
John, you're making an excellent point. And there's another point to be made, and that's I don't have to guess here. I know the Constitution very well. And so the idea of these, you can't make it up as you go along, folks. Doesn't allow it. When you start saying things like you're going to have retroactive laws made.
Basically, Taft, the guy who was from senator or congressman of Ohio, he was the grandson, I think, of the president, former president, Taft, he tried to argue the Nuremberg trials after the Second World War is actually against American constitutional because they weren't supposed to pass ex post facto laws. And the Nuremberg trial and the ensuing punishments we found after, that was all part of, that was actually a violation of the U.S. Constitution.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let me read this to you, John. You see, it's one part of it is the ex post facto law. We don't want persons passing laws after an act has been committed, and then passing a law to make that act that was committed prior to the act being in force, and then trying the person that committed the act before it was a law, and then applying that law to the action that was done before the law was passed. So I wanted to find I wanted to go to Article 1, Section 9, and I wanted to read this to you because there's something else in here that they're doing that's also forbidden by the Constitution. I'm going to read this to you as well. In Article 1, Section 9, Clause 2, listen to this very carefully. The privileges of the writ of habeas corpus shall not be suspended unless when in cases of rebellion or invasion, the public safety may require it. Now listen to this part. No bill of attainder. You see, in the same part where it forbids ex post facto laws, it also forbids bills of attainder. So in Article 1, Section 9, Clause 3, it says this: no bill of attainder, ATTAINDER, or ex post facto law shall be passed. Now we know what ex post facto law is, because John was just going into that in terms of a law being passed after the fact and then applying the law to the act that was enjoined before the law was on the book. Can't do that. Ex post facto laws are unconstitutional, should not be on the books. And if it's unconstitutional, it also should be illegal. But sometimes that which is illegal is that which is illegal. Sometimes that which is unconstitutional is not illegal because the people will act like you can make something legal that's unconstitutional, and you can't do that either. If it's unconstitutional, it's illegal.
Well, if you're a Democrat, you can do it.
If you're a Democrat,
they get
you
away
do
with
it.
it. They do it all the time.
Do it all the time, and we got to catch it. We got to call them on that because it's so dangerous. We're in a very dangerous place right now. But when it says bill of attainder, what does that mean? It means this. Listen carefully. Because in Article 1, Section 9, Clause 3, it says this now: no bill of attainder or ex post facto law shall be passed. It doesn't say should be, maybe it should not. It says shall not be passed. You can't do it. Now, what's a bill of attainder? That is, listen carefully, Merrick Garland, because I'm calling for your impeachment and your removal through the impeachment process. And by doing that, what I'm calling for in the impeachment part is it must be a matter of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors, and you've definitely done that. The specificity of the charge must be one that rises to the level of removal. Impeachment, there's no level for impeachment. That's what I'm trying to get people to understand. That impeachment is just an accusation of wrongdoing. And I'm saying also, and there's no scholar in this country that is qualified to challenge me on this either, and you think you can, I think you should do it publicly. Don't be tipping around now but do it in public, and let's call names out. Say my name, so I know that you're challenging me, because you will get a response. Now, what is a law of attainder? A bill of attainder is a bill that applies to one person but does not apply to another. That's a bill of attainder.
Or AKA selective enforcement.
Yeah, selective enforcement. John, that's it. Selective enforcement. And that's what they're doing with Donald Trump. The president is a single office holder, folks, of the executive branch of government. And who do you call when something is to be declassified by the president? You don't call Ghostbusters, and you don't call anyone else. Who is the president to call? When he's the CEO, the single office holder of the executive branch of government, who does the president call that get permission to declassify documents that he singly has the power to classify? The absurdity of it.
It's gut wrenching for a constitutionalist, because the thing is, we constitutionalists are willing to say we allow the other side to get the upper hand, but we're not going out of our way to try to change the document just to go nail that one individual. These guys, you got to have consistency in government. You got to have consistency in law and law enforcement to keep a country going. But the selective enforcement is destroying this country. This
It is so dangerous. You have to read my article today on Facebook, because I'm doing what Donald Trump said in Pennsylvania this past weekend. He said that they have taken the gloves off, and we have to take the gloves off too.
Look at. I don't know if I was going to bring this up to after the, but look at Robert F. Kennedy. He was going to make a bid to run against Biden. Mm-hmm. They denied him Secret Service protection.
Wow.
I mean, okay, this is his own party.
This is unbelievable what's happening in this country.
This country basically, you will support this man.
We don't have one more shot at it. They're feeling the Cheerios right now. They think they've gotten away with it. They got away with the coronavirus.
Weaponize the DOJ.
Which they used to as a cover to hide how they stole the election in 2020. Joe Biden didn't get no 81 million votes, and nobody in this country believes that. Nobody believes that. You those that went to Washington that did not believe that were put in jail, and they did that to put a notice on the American people to shut up about it. And on the inauguration date, they put 26,000 troops there against the American people. In fact, as a way of saying to them, do not challenge this outcome. That's what they were saying. There was a military takeover. There's a military takeover in this country. And we got one more shot at saving this republic. It's that serious. And I'll be writing about this until November the 5th of next year, because now the gloves got to come off. Donald Trump said this. He's right. Any Republican Party member, and I don't say Republican because there are no Republicans in Congress and there are no Democrats in Congress. Any Republican Party member that does not stand up right now should be primaried without any exception. And I'm waiting to see what happens when they get enough backbone to bring about the impeachment against Biden. Stop talking about Hunter Biden. I mean, don't stop taking action against him because what the man has done against his country. This is treason on the Biden. We got a crime family in Joe Biden. There's a crime family in power. This is the Bidenese. We got the countries in the White House. We got the country family is the first family of this country. There was a coup in this country. And we got to take the gloves off to confront it. There's no more hiding. I had never written a more provocative article than I did today on Facebook. And I mean every word I say. And I get very emotional about it because I know what the country did at the beginning point. I know it very well. And I have too much of my training invested in it to take it lightly. Too many years invested. And this is a travesty. We're losing this country because nobody wants to return the country back to its glorious beginning point when the country was great. But you got to understand something even in that regard. The greatness that was there lasted from 1776 to 1796. I'm right in saying this, although nobody's writing about it. The grandeur of the United States lasted one generation before the politicians took over. And they did so under John Adams. That's the beginning point. In collusion with the members of the Congress that passed in 1798 the Alien and Sedition Act. That's the beginning of the unraveling of what the framers put in place, and has been unraveling ever since. And now it's totally unraveled because nobody understands how we got here. The people in Congress don't understand how we got here. And until they begin to do the things that they are sent there to do, we shouldn't listen to them. They're not representing. I said today in my post that we have a foreign government in Washington, operating on American soil. This government is a foreign government. It's owned by foreigners, and it's on American soil, run by officials elected in this country. But you think they're beholden to this country? Go listen to what Mike Pence said in his interview with Tucker Carlson 2 weeks ago. Mike Pence said when Carlson is raising this question about their particulars about Ukraine. Why are they more concerned about Ukraine's borders than our own borders? And Pence said, without thinking about it, because this is the way they think, but they're not supposed to be saying this stuff out in public. But the public policy says it. But they're not supposed to say that in so many words where a person can understand that's what they're doing. But when he said about the concern of the United States, Pence said that's not his concern, and it's not their concern.
He said the quiet part out loud. That's all it is.
He said, that's what he did, John. He came out and said it out in front of the public. Destroyed his. Well, he didn't have anything coming in the first place. He only got 4%, and now it's probably not going to be any percent because that statement is catching up with him. It's catching up with the rest of them also, and they got to find a new way to, in fact, stop Trump because they have not done it yet. The man is unbent, unbossed, and unbowed. And they don't know what to do with this man. He's standing in the place, in some ways, of George Washington, but there's only one George Washington. And there's no president that stands in George Washington's place. None. None would have done what he did. Particularly those that tried to change the two-term precedent, because that's what George Washington laid down for the country. Limited power, even by the number of terms that you serve in office. At a certain point, go home, and let someone else in there with new ideas come in and do the rest of the work. Okay, I got to get out of here. I'm running beyond time again. But I do want you to understand here, the President of the United States, and I'll go and pick up this other part of that next week, cannot be brought to trial in any court in this country under the Constitution for having classified documents that he took out of the executive branch of government while he was President of the United States. Now I'll go into that next week and tell you why that's also true. All you scholars, pay attention. Until next week, I want you to follow your dream. If you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.